How's it going, everyone? Ian Patrick here. And tonight we have a little bit of a sad one. Now, typically in the summertime, I try to keep things upbeat with. I created a recent playlist, Mediterranean Beauty. So, traveling, Europe, beautiful exotic locations. I try to watch those type of movies in the summer. But I was once again in a Laurence Olivier mood, and I thought, oh, well, let's see a movie of his that I've never seen before. And this one sounded really interesting from the brief summary that I read before watching it. Tonight's movie review is of Carrie, and it came out in 1952. And it's a Paramount film that stars Laurence Olivier and Jennifer Jones. It also has Miriam Hopkins in it and Eddie Albert, who is a very interesting character in this film. I want to start out by noting that Olivier in this, he has a very good American accent in this. In fact, he would ask his director, I think, and this was directed by William Wyler the Great, and I believe he asked William Wyler, hey, I need to work on perfecting my acting and my parts. So I believe he hooked him up with Spencer Tracy to help him work on a Chicago-ish accent, which it paid off. It definitely paid off. And he plays a George Hurstwood in this. Hurstwood's a great name. And he basically starts out as this restaurant owner. He's not exactly the owner, but he runs the best, most popular restaurant in early days Chicago. And Jennifer Jones, it's funny, I'll say, because the movie is called Carrie, so I was thinking, this movie is probably going to be all about Carrie. It's going to be about the woman, the leading role, but completely wrong. And Hurstwood, Olivier's character, completely steals the show. Pretty much, I would say he's the main character of the film. It's not Carrie. And this was actually based on a book called Sister Carrie by Theodore Dreiser, which he was a very popular American novelist years ago. And I read somewhere that apparently Paramount didn't want to call this Sister Carrie because they thought people would think this is about a nun, which is very understandable. But I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought that was a little funny story. And I'll also note that we'll get more into the history later, but when Olivier and his wife, Vivian Lee, came to America to film like Olivier was in a movie and Lee was in a movie in Hollywood. Well, Danny Kaye threw them a huge party with Lauren Bacall there, Humphrey Bogart, of course. If there's a big party, he's going to be there. So Errol Flynn was there. Lots of stars were there. So I thought that was interesting that Danny Kaye would do that. So I'll also note that Jennifer Jones has really grown on me. I remember the first movie I saw with her was The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, and I wasn't too impressed with her in that, but the more I see of her, the more I'm like, okay, she's pretty good. She's pretty good. In fact, I thought she was decent in this. I'll also note that this movie is a very serious movie and a very depressing movie. It's certainly a drama. Because it's all about basically watching the great fall and decay of a powerful and rich man in Chicago. So this starts out, like I said, where Hurstwood, he's a prominent man in society, Chicago society. He is wealthy. He has a beautiful family, suburban life. But he's unhappy with his marriage to Miriam Hopkins. He's middle-aged, I'd probably say in this he's supposed to be 50s, but the makeup that was done on Olivier was very, very good, because I even told my dad after, I was like, I don't think Olivier was that old when this was filmed, but he looked old. He definitely did. In fact, towards the end, he really looks old and aged. So Jennifer Jones is this poor young woman who moves to the city to basically make her own fortune, find her way. She lives with like her cousin or something like that, and she works in a sweatshop. And William Wyler was always so good at showing like the struggles of early 1900s Americans. We saw that in the best years of our lives, which is a masterpiece, I might add. And there are a lot of similarities. He certainly has a style where he shows the darker side of American culture from back then. But in this, we see how awful conditions were in a sweatshop. And we also see how this beautiful woman, she loses her job, and essentially she falls on her good looks to figure out, what am I going to do next? Because her cousin kicks her out because she accepts money from a man, which is Charlie, who's played by Eddie Albert. And Charlie is such a funny character, but he's such a creep because the whole time you're like, this guy's just trying to get into Jennifer Jones's pants. But Charlie grows on you throughout the course of the movie. So she moves in with him, and she stumbles upon Hurstwood when they both go to his restaurant, because she goes looking for Charlie there. And Hurstwood is just, you can already tell he thinks, wow, this is a beautiful woman. And basically Hurstwood gets invited later to go to Charlie's apartment, where now Carrie's living with him out of wedlock, which is a sort of a big deal for back then that she's doing that. In fact, the neighbors judge her, and it really shows the difference between how things were back then and how they are today, because now it's like boyfriend and girlfriend living together really isn't that big of a deal, but back then it was like, oh my gosh, they're living in sin. So anyway, Hurstwood slowly falls more and more in love with her, and she responds back with love, and they essentially have an affair, and she has no idea that he's married. So this whole time we're like, she is a good woman because she's just being taken advantage of by all these men in this big city. In fact, Hurstwood continues to lie to her, doesn't tell her the full truth that he's indeed married. But eventually she does learn one way or another. We don't need to go too far into the details of that, but I will say he does eventually just throw his entire life away. He throws his kids away, basically. He has nothing more to do with them. He has nothing more to do with his wife. And he just goes off. He steals money from his father-in-law, and he's basically a criminal. He's broke. This man just throws everything away for love, and it's honestly a little sickening watching this, watching the decay of Hurstwood. He gives everything for her, and you're just like, man, was it worth it the whole time? And it's hard to watch at some points. I'll note the scene when he's moved into an apartment later in New York with Carrie, and his pants, like his clothes are old and bad. He's living in this rundown apartment with just horrible conditions for his standards, and you just see him looking around like, I can't do this. Like, and I honestly can feel it because Olivier is just amazing in this movie at just, you feel the weight on his shoulders. It's like, oh my gosh, what have you done, man? And honestly, the whole movie, I was worried. I was just thinking, Carrie's a young, beautiful woman. I wouldn't be surprised if she's going to leave him eventually. And spoiler alert, so please don't listen to this if you haven't watched it yet. Spoiler alert is that she does leave him. She leaves him thinking she's doing him good, when in reality she basically leaves him to having no money, and basically he becomes homeless, becomes sick with tuberculosis. We see again through Wyler's directing, like, homeless people live in awful conditions in this day and age. It's a very powerful scene when he's just in this awful living situation. He's begging for money, begging for food. But honestly, and I'll also note the scene where she accidentally, I was stepping back a little, she accidentally burns his pants with her iron, and he's just like, Carrie! Because he only has one suit. And this is his nice suit, probably from when he was living back with his family. And you just feel like he's lost everything when she messes up with that. There's a lot of this. Honestly, I told my parents again that this movie was like a soap opera, because it's just one bad thing after another. Affair, broke, their baby dies, she leaves him, he's home. It's a big soap opera, but it's a good movie. But I wonder what you all think about her leaving him. Like, I was honestly very mad that she did that. In fact, I was disgusted. She goes on to become a big star. I know at the very, very end, she tries to make things right, come back, you're my true love. But I wasn't buying it. I did not like how she just left her husband like that. Anyway, I'm going to give this movie a 3 stars. It's definitely worth a watch. It's not a feel-good movie. It's really not. I did not feel good after watching it. I didn't feel good after it. I didn't feel good watching it. But it is a good, great drama. Olivier, just powerful acting. Jennifer Jones is a little weak, but it's a good supporting cast with Eddie Albert. It's definitely worth a watch. And William Wyler, you can never go wrong with his films. And honestly, when the film came out, it didn't do too well because, in fact, William Wyler would later admit, this he said this movie was too depressing for the audience of the time, because audiences were wanting to escape from depressing situations. They didn't want to go to the theater to see that stuff. And honestly, I'm like that too. When I go to the theater, I don't want to see something super depressing. I can watch that at home all day, but I don't want to spend money, go to the theater, eat popcorn, and just be depressed watching. No. So it didn't do too well. I have some things to show you and to quote. I have some pretty good stories. Here's a picture, first of all. Hurstwood looking pretty miserable. And to start things out, so they had to convince Olivier to accept the part. He didn't originally want to accept the part and go to Hollywood to film this. To encourage Olivier to accept Paramount's offer, Dreiser's widow, which is the author of the book, Helen, wrote to him, calling him the greatest dramatic intellect of his time, praising his films of Hamlet and Henry V, and hoping he and Vivian would enjoy being in the United States this time. Olivia wrote thanking her for this, quote, sweet presentiment, and went on, quote, we usually do for some reason or another, but there is also usually a feeling of something not having been all right, probably our fault, and always an anxiety before one goes. It may all be homesick nonsense. He had such a toxic relationship with Vivian Leigh. It's really sad. And he had this, they both were flying out. She flew out before he did. And they would write each other love notes all the time. But he had this to say to one of his friends. He said about his relationship with Vivian, we never converse, we only confer. So he already wasn't feeling too good about their marriage. So this is a note that she had sent to him during the filming of Carrie. My darling, darling Hurstwood, good luck to my adored one, my Baba, my Larry. So she called him Baba. Um, Olivier became Hurstwood in his own way. Kazan happened to be living opposite him and could see him rehearsing on his own. Quote, some great actors imitate the outside and work in from there. Larry needs to know, first of all, how the person he's to play walks, stands, sits, dresses, concentrating on what might seem to us to be insignificant aspects of the characterization. I remember pausing outside a window late one Sunday morning and undetected watching Larry go through the pantomime of offering a visitor a chair. He'd try it this way, then that, looking at the guest, then at the chair, doing with a host's flourish, doing it with a graceless gesture, then thrusting it brusquely forward, more like Hurstwood that way, never satisfied, always seeking what would be most revealing way to do what would be a quickly passing bit of stage business for any other actor. So he's always trying to perfect his character. On the set at Paramount, Olivier found Jennifer Jones not so much a delight as he had confidently asserted he would. Toward the end of Streetcar, Vivian had to work on location in New Orleans for 3 weeks. Olivia saw her off on the train and then wrote to her. In one letter, he had said he had been rehearsing that morning while Jennifer was busy failing to understand Wyler. Quote, I'm doing the Carrie don't, he spelled this weird. I'm doing the Carrie don't make me live through too much pain to get up sequence with Jennifer really being a C-U-N-T. I guess I don't know. I guess she bloody well effing doesn't know anything about anything. No soul, like we always said about them dumb animals with human brains, end quote. So, harsh words. He called her the C word. Yeah, that's very harsh. So then, when he came to the sequences near the end, when Hurstwood is down and out starving, he really starved himself. That's such a character actor. He wrote to Vivian, I don't feel at all hungry, just as if I'm dying. It's very good for Hurstwood right now. Don't worry, my darling. It's doing me good, really, I think. The diet, I mean. He said he had asked about the K's, Danny Kaye, that night for a quiet dinner and the Colemans the next day and ended, quote, oh, my love, I feel like a half-cooked codfish thrown back into the sea when you're not with me. I love you, so my heart's treasure. Oh, how I long for you in the sight of your lovely, wonderful face. And not only that, for my sore, boring eyes, your boy. They wrote such romantic letters to each other. And then he also had this to say, because apparently the director of Paramount sent him like some letter thanking him for such a great performance. He said, from the office of the president, said he and his executives had been completely moved by his, quote, sensitive rendition of a man utterly rent asunder. He said, a letter from the boss is something one very seldom gets in our business. And as a matter of fact, yours is the first I have ever had in my career from the office of any president. So that's it for all I have on the history of the film. Now I just have some really good pictures to show you. Hurstwood. There they are in their little home. And there's Charlie. Miriam Hopkins. And I believe that was the train scene. So that's going to be it for this. This review went on way longer than I expected. Like I said, it's a depressing film. Don't watch this if you're looking for something happy. Watch it if you're in a drama mood. Definitely see it. It's a good film. And I will catch you all next time. Have a good night.